Hello and welcome to The Bottom Line here on TVP World. This is where we unpack some of the main business and economic stories of the day. I'm your host, Marie Cato. Poland's president-elect Karol Nawrocki intends to get to work as soon as he gets sworn in August. One of the first items on his to-do list is to submit a number of fiscal bills for consideration to reduce VAT to 22%, zero personal income tax for families with at least 2 children, raising the second tax threshold, tax-free inheritance, and abolishing the so-called Belka tax. To get a better idea of whether these financial bills are actually a realistic possibility in Poland's current fiscal climate, let's now go to Konrad Gorliński's report.
Poland's president-elect Karol Nawrocki is wasting no time getting started. Although he won't officially move into the presidential palace until August 6th, several Polish media outlets report that Nawrocki is already preparing to present a legislative package to Parliament as soon as he's sworn in. And there are some very intriguing proposals therein. To begin with, Nawrocki wants to raise the tax-free income threshold to 60,000 zloty. That's about 14,000 euro. And during his campaign, he also promised what he called a tax contract, which would include cutting VAT back to 22%, eliminating personal income tax for families with at least 2 children, raising the second tax threshold, scrapping the inheritance tax, and abolishing the so-called Belka capital gains tax. Now, all this sounds attractive from a taxpayer's perspective, but the big question is, where will the money come from? Poland is already under the EU's excessive deficit procedure, and at the same time plans to ramp up defense spending. How could the government even consider significant tax cuts at this time?
There's really never a good time, if you talk to politicians, to lower taxes.
Now, many of these tax cuts do address real policy concerns. For instance, Poland's VAT was hiked temporarily during the financial crisis, but never brought back down. At 23%, it's now among the highest in the EU. Likewise, giving bigger tax breaks to families addresses another serious issue. Poland's population is shrinking at a worrisome pace of about 130,000 people per year, meaning fewer future taxpayers with each passing year.
Again, addressing that issue is very important. And there's 2 ways to do it. One is by trying to increase the birth rate, and the second is through migration. We know a lot of the issues and controversies around mass migration. So here's an attempt to incentivize Polish families to have children.
Commentators from Poland's United Right have taken a more cynical view. They say that while Nawrocki and his colleagues in the opposition Law and Justice Party know that they don't have the numbers in Parliament to pass any such bill, many of these ideas were floated both by Prime Minister Donald Tusk and presidential candidate Rafał Trzaskowski during their election campaigns. So, Nawrocki is just calling their bluff. Michał Wojcicki, however, has a much more positive view of Nawrocki's possible first move as president. He views it as an attempt to kickstart a meaningful conversation about tax reform and real policy solutions.
I think it could be a great start, actually, to his presidency and a cooperation between the government under Donald Tusk and Nawrocki. I think it could be a way to say, let's build a better, stronger, economically more vibrant Poland, which can defend itself, has the money to defend itself because it is economically vibrant.
The real motive will come out in the wash, but there is hope that this is more than just a political ploy.
Dziękuję Państwu bardzo.
The first opportunity for the president-elect and the government to work together is already coming up, and it concerns issues that resonate with Poles regardless of their political standing. The question is, will it come together? What might stand in the way? How might this impact the country's economic policy and overall priorities? Can the government and the president's office deliver on their promise of peaceful cohabitation? We're now joined by Ignacy Morawski, chief economist at the Polish business daily Puls Biznesu. Hello, and thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello. Karol Nawrocki is already setting up an opportunity for the president's office and the government to work together. What is the likelihood that both sides will make this work?
Well, I think there are a couple of areas in which the cooperation between the government and the president can be smooth. Last 2 years demonstrated that in the area of defense, military expenditure, and security, the cooperation can work, even though the government and the president represent opposite political camps. So I suppose that over the next couple of years, we will see cooperation in the area of defense and security. However, the scope of cooperation is limited to those narrow areas. I think that in general, the cohabitation will be characterized by conflict and different views on economy, society, international policy, external affairs. So there will be a lot of, I would say, difficult choices and situations.
Word is that Finance Minister Andrzej Domański says that there is no chance that Nawrocki's proposals will go through. And then what? Obviously, this will trigger tension between the coalition government and the president. But will this be a strategic move on the side of the coalition government?
We have to remember that the Polish budget is very strained. The deficit is large. The deficit of the general government, so all public sector, exceeds 6% of GDP. The rate of increase in public debt is high. So there is no room for substantial tax cuts or expenditure or new expenditures. So when the president proposes large tax cuts, the government will be forced to reject them. And to me, it seems that the proposals from the president will be aimed at creating conflict. So this is a political game. On the other hand, the weak point of the government is that it promised 2 years ago, it promised substantial tax cuts, but did not deliver them because it couldn't due to large fiscal deficit. So this is the promise that was not met, that was not realized. And this is, in political terms, an Achilles heel of this government. And the president will try to use it to demonstrate, to show to the public that this government is not meeting its promises.
Well, you say that the budget is very tight. Obviously, the deficit is pretty high. And obviously, there is significant spending on defense. But if we were to see the Belka tax removed, wouldn't this encourage Polish citizens to perhaps purchase government bonds? And that would obviously be a source of capital, the increase of capital for the government.
Well, it depends how the capital gains tax cut is introduced. Because if there is a general tax cut on all assets, on all capital gains, there is no reason why people should allocate more resources to government bonds. If the Belka tax, so the capital gain tax, is cut mainly on government bonds holdings, that would obviously create incentives to buy more government bonds. However, we should remember that the share of Polish individuals, of households, in the stock of government bonds is very high. It's higher than the share of foreign investors. So it would be difficult to increase it much further, I think. And due to large bond issuance, the government has to draw foreign investors, attract foreign investors to Polish market. So I don't think that changing the tax structure in favor of Polish households would make a huge difference in terms of financing of the borrowing needs.
Okay, but let's just look at this from a theoretical perspective. If Nawrocki's proposals were to go through, would this be at all sustainable under the 5% GDP on defense threshold and the current budget deficit? And how could the government potentially proceed?
If substantial tax cuts are introduced, the deficit will increase because the proposals by the new coming president are very costly. So the deficit will increase. And we can live with increased deficit. You know, the example of Romania demonstrates that you can have 9% of GDP deficit, right? However, there are costs. So it's not that we cannot have much higher deficit. We can, but we will pay the price. So the price, what will be the price? The price is a higher interest rate. The price is weaker currency, probably, but this is not certain, but probably to some extent, the price might be in the form of higher inflation rate. So it is possible to maintain higher deficit, especially in the country which has a high growth rate. So unless the cost of servicing debt is higher than GDP growth, the sustainability of the debt ratios is quite high. So it's easy for the government to attract investors and maintain government debt sustainability when the interest rates are lower than GDP growth. And this is the case of Poland now. However, if the deficit increases much more than recently, then obviously interest rates will be higher. And this relation between interest rates and the GDP growth will worsen. So, you know, the answer is that we can have larger deficit, but we have to calculate the costs. And I think that the costs will be difficult to bear for the society.
Do you think that what we are seeing right now, these potential proposals, why is this being portrayed as an offensive as opposed to the government, the president-elect, simply trying to deliver on his promises? At the end of the day, these promises that we're hearing are actually promises that we have heard before, especially from the previous government, so previous campaigns. Sorry.
Well, the aim here is clear: to weaken the government. This is the main goal of the president now. So, if the president introduces proposals which demonstrate that the government is not meeting its promises, then in political terms, it weakens the government. So it's very difficult for the parliament and for the government to reject the tax cut proposal. This is how politics works. So when the government rejects the Karol Nawrocki proposal, it will lose political points. That's the simple game here. So to me, it seems that the government will have to find ways to respond proactively, not only defend itself and reject president's proposals, but also actively engage in new policies. So it is probable that in the end, also the government will try to introduce some tax cuts, like increase the free allowance rate, right? The threshold.
The likelihood.
So in political terms,
Go ahead.
So in political terms, it will be very difficult to stabilize the budget.
The likelihood of all these proposals going through is very low, and we know from various sources from Law and Justice that they're completely aware of this. But what is the likelihood? Which one do you think, if any of the proposals actually go through, which one do you think is most likely?
Well, to me, it seems that the personal tax cut is probably the most likely outcome, because this is the point which was promised by Donald Tusk. the current Prime Minister. During the campaign before the parliamentary elections in 2023, Donald Tusk promised that the personal tax cut rate would be cut in the form of increasing the allowance threshold. So in this area, the government will have to do something. So I suppose that there will be a personal tax cut in Poland over the next year.
And what are the
which is bad for the economy? Which is bad for the economy, I think, because we have rising military expenditures, rising healthcare expenditures, and cutting taxes in these circumstances is clearly harmful for stability, for credibility, and in the end for long-term growth. We have low personal income tax rates in Poland comparing to other countries. We don't need to cut them further.
And Poles broadly invest in real estate, though, and because of the Belka tax, the capital gains tax, they have no incentive of investing in stocks or shares. And the awareness and understanding in terms of future financial planning is rather poor. It's something that is generally commented on. Surely removing the Belka tax would be a positive incentive. Do you not think so?
Well, it might be, but we should remember that there are already financial schemes which allow to invest without capital gains tax, right? So we have pension accounts. So each household can save money in pension accounts, which do not include capital gains tax. So we already have financial schemes which allow long-term savings without taxes. So I'm not sure whether cutting the Belka tax is a game changer. It might help. It might change incentives for households to switch from allocating resources to real estate to allocating resources to capital markets. However, as I said, I don't suppose it can be a game changer, like something that will completely change the incentives, the behavior, and help to kickstart the development of capital markets. It is one instrument and probably not the most important one.
But surely it would be one step closer.
Yes.
A move in the right direction, at least.
Well, I don't like to comment on tax policies by commenting on each tax separately, right? We have to look at the whole tax system. At this moment, the level of taxes in Poland is quite low, comparing to the level of public expenditure. So if somebody asks me whether cutting a certain tax is positive or negative, my general answer is that we should look at the whole system and think about what we want to do with the large discrepancy between spending and revenues in the fiscal side. So imagine we cut Belka tax, we lose some revenue, and it worsens the stability of public finances. Is it good for the capital market or not? I think it's not. It's not.
So just as we wrap up,
what do you assess taxes separately
Sure.
from the general view of public finances?
So just as we wrap up, what is your overall assessment of these proposals that we see from Karol Nawrocki in light of the economic and social standing of Poland at the moment and the priorities that the country has?
My overall assessment is that this is the start of political war between the government and the president. So the proposal is aimed at weakening the government, is aimed at demonstrating that the government has not met its promises, and it's aimed at strengthening the opposition. In financial terms, we don't have fiscal room for substantial tax cuts in Poland. If we do cut taxes, then we will see more instability in the public finance sector, so probably higher interest rates than in the business as usual scenario, right? Higher interest rates means more difficult investments, less dynamism in the economy. So at this moment, to me, it seems that the deficit is already large. The economy is at maximum employment, and we do not need to stimulate the economy more with fiscal policy.
Okay, Ignacy Morawski, Chief Economist at Polish business daily Puls Biznesu. Thank you so much for your insight today. And that concludes the bottom line for today. I was your host, Marie Cato. We bring you the best of regional business Monday to Friday at 5 CET on TVP World. And in the meantime, for the latest in regional business, follow us on X and on tvpworld.com. And for more news and analysis, stay with us on TVP World.